Hi, you're welcome to our Skin and All channel, where we'll talk about all things skin related, all things health related. We talk about relationships, mentoring, life lessons, different things. So it's a variety of things on Skin and All YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is important to every parent out there. So if you are a caregiver, you have a child, this topic is important to you. And you're going to get a lot of tips by the end of this video that I'm sure that you'll come back to watch this video a couple of times after the first time you watched it. What am I talking about today? I'm talking about a condition called atopic dermatitis. Have you ever heard of atopic dermatitis before? It's a long name, but don't worry. I'm going to break it down for you to understand. Atopic dermatitis is a condition whereby some certain people, due to some genetic factors that they have, coupled with exposure to some environmental factors, they tend to have, continuous sensitivity of their skin to a lot of environmental factors, which they otherwise would not be sensitive to if they were not genetically predisposed. So breaking it down further, atopic dermatitis just refers to some people that have what we call sensitive skin. In let me use Niger lingo, people that have body skin. Okay, so when they have body skin, meaning like, so I try when I'm counseling my patients, just that they know that it is not that their skin is bad or anything. I tell them that your skin is very posh. So when it is exposed to some environmental factors, or when it is exposed to some things that would not irritate people, that their skin is not so posh, your skin may start to react to it. So atopic dermatitis refers to a condition where somebody that has some things that, that person is born with makes them sensitive to a lot of things that they may not be sensitive to when they're exposed to it in the environment. In medicine, when we don't have a specific cause for something, we say that the cause of that condition is not exactly known, but it's a combination of different factors. It's a combination of some genetic factors and environmental factors, like I've said. So one thing that is important to note in atopic dermatitis is that such individuals, there's the immune system. So their immune system has a predominance of one type of immune system that makes them, have sensitive skin. So that predominance of that system, that immune system is called the T helper 2 system. They kind of have a predominance of that system in them. And because of this, they have something we call a leaky skin barrier, like something is leaking. So the skin is supposed to be, normally there's this tight structure, and you should have your skin not getting anything to enter that intact barrier. But atopic dermatitis patients tend to have what we call a leaky skin barrier, so they are sensitive to a lot of environmental factors. And one thing to also note about atopic dermatitis is that atopic dermatitis belongs to some group of diseases that we call atopic diseases or allergic diseases. So children that have atopic dermatitis, they may go on to develop some other allergic diseases later in life. And most of these allergic diseases that I'm going to mention, they have that T helper 2 pathway. Remember I mentioned it about the immune system. They have that T helper 2 pathway being predominant in them. So we call that clustering of diseases, those particular conditions, we call it what we call the atopic march. Like something is marching on, one thing is marching onto the other. So, for example, children with atopic dermatitis may have atopic dermatitis as a child. Then later on in life, some of them, and I should say it at this point that it is not so common, but some of them may develop some food allergies later in life, especially to some certain foods like seafood, peanuts. Some of them may go on to develop something we call allergic rhinitis. Their nose is never dry. They keep on having catarrh, runny nose at one time or the other. Some of them may go on to develop asthma later in life. So atopic dermatitis can move from one allergic disease to the other. And the funny thing about this condition again is that some people may have atopic dermatitis and they don't have any of these allergic diseases again. Some people, on the other hand, may have bronchial asthma or asthma, like a reactive airway, and they don't have any of the other diseases that I've mentioned. Let me use my family as an example. I have asthma. Then my younger ones, some of them have a sensitive skin. Another person has the rhinitis. Another person has the itchy eyes. So it's like a combination of things, but you notice that it's clustering in the family. And which brings me to the point where I tell you that atopic dermatitis, this sensitivity of the skin that I'm talking about, has a strong, tendency to occur in people that they have a family history of sensitive skin. So when you are seeing a child with atopic dermatitis, for example, it is not unusual to find some of the family members, especially the father or the mother. It's not unusual to find them when you ask them and they say, oh, I recall that my mom told me that when I was a child, I used to have a lot of rashes or sensitive skin and all that. And some of them may even say, oh, my dad is asthmatic or my mom is asthmatic. So telling you that these atopic diseases, they tend to cluster within families. So I've been talking about atopic dermatitis. How exactly does atopic dermatitis present? The typical history of atopic dermatitis, or AD as we shorten it, is usually a child. And that child, most of the time, most people that will develop atopic dermatitis would have presented before the age of 1, or at most before the age of 5. So up to 85% of people that would develop atopic dermatitis in their lives would have presented before the age of 5, or around the age before they are over 5 years. So what this means is that atopic dermatitis is usually a disease of childhood. And how do they present? So the typical history is a child, probably around 6 months, and the mother or the father or the caregiver tells you that, oh, since this child got to this age, they would usually have some rashes in their the insides of their elbows. They have some rashes on their neck. They have some rashes on their face. They have some rashes at the back of their knees. And those rashes, they look like itch rashes, maybe a bigger form of itch rashes, and they are usually itchy. Another thing they'll tell you is that, I've just noticed that my son or my daughter has generally had a dry skin since about 6 months of life. Another thing they might tell you is that when they wear some certain kinds of clothes, or when they're exposed to, or they might not even know until you start to ask those questions, that what are the kinds of things that flare this condition up. So the typical history is a child that has all these rashes that I've mentioned, and they are usually itchy. Usually itching is a component that would accompany these rashes. And apart from itching, it will be noted that most of them would have dry skin. So dryness generally in the skin, when your skin is dry, it predisposes you to itching. And one funny thing about itching is that the more you scratch, the more something called the itch scratch cycle is generated. That means the more you scratch it, the more it itches you, the more you scratch. So they are almost constantly scratching. And most times they don't even sleep well at night because of the scratching. So that's the typical history. It starts as something we call acute. And acute meaning that in the initial stage, when they are itching, the skin in that area may break open, water, some fluid may start to come out of it. Then after some time, it may become chronic. And at that point where it is chronic, you know the way fish scales look like, the way it is thick, and in black skin generally, it will become hyperpigmented. And what does hyper mean? Hyper means too much. Pigmented means color. So it may become darker than the normal skin color and thicker than the normal skin color when it becomes chronic. That means when they've been scratching, when they've been touching for a longer time than, for a long time. So generally, how do you manage atopic dermatitis? The most important thing to note is that atopic dermatitis is manageable rather than curable. I'm sorry, but good news, I have good news for you. I said a lot of patients will present by age of 5. In up to 2/3 of patients, most of them, as they grow older, they kind of outgrow it. It's like the body is now exposed to a lot of the things that make them react, and it has developed a better way of managing it. Let's put it that way. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. Most people will kind of wear out or fizzle out as they grow older. So how do you manage this condition? The most important thing to note with atopic dermatitis is to avoid the triggers. You may not know that they are triggers, but at the end of this video, I'm sure you would already know the triggers of atopic dermatitis. So what they call TLC, tender loving care, that's what their skin needs. You really don't need to use antiseptic soaps for them. We're in Nigeria. Okay, right now I'm shooting this video from Nigeria. I don't know where you are watching this video, but extremes of temperature is something that their skin does not like. So when it is so cold, when it is so hot, when they are sweating a lot, when they are exposed to some materials that are synthetic, so you are better off wearing pure cotton material for them. Then there are some things that any atopic disease, like all the other ones that I've mentioned, in an area in your house, if you have a lot of rugs, a lot of pets, the fur from the animals can trigger this sensitive skin in them. So make sure that they're not playing with the pets and the fur is getting all over their body. Make sure that as much as possible you don't have heavy draperies in your house. Don't use those heavy curtains, the rugs, they're not rolling around on the rugs and all that. Again, it's also very important. There's this argument of how many times should we bathe. The most important thing to note is that even if you are bathing twice a day, always moisturize the skin afterwards. For atopic patients, you cannot afford not to moisturize, and don't stay too long in the bathroom. So you're better off with temperature that is tepid, like lukewarm water. You don't want hot water that will strip the skin too much of its natural oils. So you want tepid water, like warm water. And immediately, and this is the part you should pay attention to, immediately after bathing them, you really don't need to use sponge. You're good with your body wash and all that. Immediately after bathing them, you make sure that their skin is a bit damp before you moisturize their skin. It's a bit damp before it makes whatever you're using to moisturize, it makes it settling better. Another thing to note is that don't scrub their skin why? The skin is not that dirty. Don't scrub their skin because remember I mentioned the itch scratch cycle. The more you do that, the more you can even, potentiate that itch scratch cycle. Again, you should have some over-the-counter medications in the house. When they are scratching, some antihistamines, loratadine, cetirizine is a good example. Have that in the house to use for them. Okay, you should always make sure you have it at home. Another thing again is that there are some over-the-counter steroids. When the skin has not broken, please, it's very important to know this, especially like 1% hydrocortisone before you go and see the doctor. When the skin has not broken, when it is still intact, when those rashes are just coming out, or when it has even become chronic, just a fingertip unit of that medication is enough for an area where 2 of your palms can cover. That means you don't really need a lot of the cream. So that steroid cream, you can apply it on those itchy areas like morning and night for about a week or 2. And by that time, you need to go and see your dermatologist, especially if it's getting, if the flare is intense. Another thing to note is that, when you read some websites, they'll tell you, oh, Vaseline or ointments like petroleum jelly is not a moisturizer. Actually, there are 3 types of moisturizers. You have the humectants, you have the emollients, and you have the occlusives. So petroleum jelly actually belongs to the list of occlusives. So I tell my patients with atopic dermatitis, especially if you don't have a lot of money and you don't need to break a bank to manage the skin, what you need to do if you're going to use an occlusive like petroleum jelly, and make sure, so when we talk about petroleum jelly, we don't want the adulterated one. And although this is not an advertisement or anything, but Vaseline Blue Seal, it's a refined petroleum jelly that, free from, any adulterated adulterations and all that. So you can, if you know that, money is a big deal, and even if it's not, my children have atopic dermatitis, and this is what I've been using for a long time, and that's what I also use. So the most important thing when you are using an occlusive as a moisturizer is that the skin is damp before you use it. Please don't mix triple action creams with your children's body cream. You are looking for trouble because they have a wide surface area of skin, and the potent steroids in that thing would cause a lot of problems for them later on. Again, in their bathing water, another thing you can do is to put some bath oil. And it doesn't even have to be some fancy bath oil. A bit of some olive oil in their bathing water, to provide like an oily interface when you are bathing them. That helps to also moisturize the skin already. So the trick to it is that you moisturize the skin properly. You ensure that you are wearing cotton materials for them. You ensure that you have antihistamines in the house. You cut their nails, make sure it's short so that they're not, scratching their skin continuously. And most importantly, you don't need to use, harsh soaps and all that. You're better off with an unscented soap, no scent, nothing. A mild, bland, cleanser to cleanse their skin. Aveeno, Sebamed, Dove, E45. Those are a lot of options. And if you really don't have any of those ones, make sure you're just using a mild toilet soap only. I've given you a lot of information in this video, and I'm sure that if you have atopic dermatitis, if you have a child with atopic dermatitis, you would have benefited a lot from this video. And there are still many more things coming up. So have you subscribed to my channel? Please like my videos, and there are several other videos that would interest you and that will make you know more about your skin. Till the next time I come your way, Skin and All is saying ciao ciao. Take care of yourself.